It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Black Hawks down in the Persian Gulf War, although in that base in Jordan that Jordan says does not exist. Donald Trump concedes that many dead and wounded United States military personnel and the famous Black Hawk helicopters have been pulverized by remorseless Iranian missile fire. In the American military assets in Bahrain, can there be any left? And why is Kuwait expecting another invasion and occupation of its territory? And in the Middle East, infanticide, masquerading as war, continues to rain down on Palestinian children in the Gaza Strip. And in the Ukraine, a war of attrition has turned into a spectacular ballistic barrage every single hour. It's all coming up here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. Difficult to know where to start, as always. The three centers of global instability, the harbingers of global depression, a depression knocking the 1930s into a cocked hat, are now all on fire simultaneously. Israel is continuing to slaughter women and children in Gaza, and the Board of Peace is, well, bored of peace and will never be heard of again. Where's the money, Donald? And in the Persian Gulf War, a kind of spectacular firestorm has begun, with all of the satrapies, the family dictatorships of the Arab side of the Persian Gulf, are all in flames, particularly Kuwait, which has become the landing strip, the battleship on land of the United States onslaught against civilian targets in Iran. So much so that I'll be asking Max Blumenthal in just a few minutes if Iran is actually going to invade Kuwait Wow, that would be a blast from the past, so that they can physically take control of the American military bases proliferating there, and from which the mass murder of Iranian civilians is being launched. It very well might happen in the course of this show. The United States has thrown all caution to the wind, has unleashed the dogs of war, cried havoc, and havoc there will be, and not just in the Persian Gulf itself. The havoc will be coming to you. This is something completely absent from political discourse in the Western world. Nobody is talking about the fact that a 1930s depression is already in the pipeline and cannot now be stopped or still less reversed. The built-in price rises and shortages of oil and gas, 25% of the world's oil and gas supply is in severe danger of being interdicted completely, in toto, with no oil and gas coming from the Persian Gulf at all, meaning not just the 25% hike in the price of these precious commodities in industrial societies and in the global south, but a far, far greater hike than that. In fact, not a hike at all. The sheer absence of the product looms large indeed. The United States bases in the region, not just the Persian Gulf, they have denuded the Persian Gulf of their military process, and their warships are still so far from the Iranian coastline to stay out of Iranian missile range that they are really there for ornamentation. But even as far away as Jordan, American bases are being destroyed. Black Hawk helicopters, aeroplanes, and of course, military personnel. Donald Trump has admitted to losing 2, but many people put that figure far higher. He has conceded that up to 45 are wounded, and people flying the medevac planes have said very few of those will make it at the end of the day. So young Americans are again giving their lives in the Epstein War, are again giving their lives for Israel on the eve of Netanyahu's 6th visit to the White House this year. And Trump has the nerve, the gall, to talk about Chinese interference. Chinese interference? Is that why all these American politicians have to go and kiss the Great Wall of China, wearing straw hats? Is that the Chinese interference he's talking about? Netanyahu's there for the 6th time this year for a reason. First of all, the American and Israeli military are now merged into one. When Netanyahu said he didn't want any more checks written from the Pentagon, he knew what he was saying. There's no need to write checks anymore. Just a bank transfer from one department of what will be forever known as the American Israel Defense Forces, or war machine, will be simply a transfer from one department to another. He's coming because of the despair being shown by Israel lobby agitators everywhere in the US that they have comprehensively lost the argument. Israel is hated in the US now almost as much as it is in European countries. Speaking of which, if Donald Trump has to hand the World Cup to the captain of the Spanish football team at the end of the World Cup final this evening, well, that's going to be very difficult, as Donald Trump has effectively declared war against the European Union state of Spain. He has told them he's going to kick them out of NATO. He's told them he's going to sanction them. He's told them that he wants nothing more to do with them. And the leaders of the European Union have said jack shit about these threats. against one of their own centrally important members because they are on their knees, panting in front of Donald Trump, which, from all I hear, is not a pleasant place to be. The Danish government and people already know what it's like to be singled out by Trump as an enemy within the friendly camp, the camp which has done America's bidding ever since the end of the Second World War, only to be turned upon for the quixotic, capricious rage and fury of a man who's clearly losing his brains. The Danish people, the Spanish people, the German people from time to time, Keir Starmer, anybody, Andy Burnham, anybody. From tomorrow, the new British Prime Minister, but don't worry, the new boss is just like the old boss, committed to every single one of the foreign policy preoccupations of Keir Starmer, who's being built up in the media now as someone, well, other than the man who had to be sacked 2 years into his 5-year premiership because everybody hated him and because he has been a dismal, unadulterated failure. We're now being told how nice he is, how good he is, how clever he is, how, I don't know, forensic he is. They're clearly setting him up for a top job. What might that top job be? Well, Rutte must have begun to outlive his usefulness. This little man from the Netherlands never really cut quite the dash that Stoltenberg and others have cut from the beginning of NATO. And his comments about Donald Trump being the daddy will certainly mean that he cannot survive the end of the Trump presidency, which may very well be coming sooner than you think. The Ukraine war has exploded. After more than a year of steady attritional advances on the ground, look at the maps, folk. Don't read the newspapers. Look at the map of the front line. Steady attritional advance by the Russian armed forces has now been replaced by a distinct change of gear. It's long been the point of view of this show and me and most of our very important guests who know what they're talking about, that Putin is going to have to take the gloves off, while NATO pretends at least to be disarmed. Although, as one wag put it earlier, if we have to rearm because Russia is going to invade us, why doesn't Russia invade us now when we have no arms? There is no answer, of course, to that conundrum, because number one, Russia has no intention of invading. Invading for what? To take control of the British economy? To take control of the crumbling, disintegrating culture, society, economy in the European heartland? Why? Why would anyone in their right mind want to take over Germany, which is collapsing in front of our eyes? Why would anyone in their right mind want to take over the monumental problems of European countries like Britain? So number one, Russia has no intention of invading us. Number two, we are very far from disarmed. That we must infer, because we are still giving weapons hand over fist to the Zelensky dictatorship, even while it is being rejected by millions of the Romanian Ukrainians still in the Ukrainian national territory. Hundreds of thousands of people are on the streets demonstrating against Volodymyr Zelensky and the press gangs that routinely haul off, drag off men in their 50s, packing them to the front line, certain death, maybe within hours, ill-clad, ill-trained, ill-armed, and subject to the extraordinary barrage of firepower, ballistic firepower, now being deployed in the war by the Russian side. So we must have weapons. Otherwise, we wouldn't be handing them over to Zelensky. And he must have weapons, more weapons than he's got men, because otherwise those weapons would not be turning up in the hands of drug cartels, organized crime gangs, and terrorist formations as far away as Africa, as they continue to do. So it's clear that in Moscow a sea change has taken place. It's clear that that sea change is going to win the day. It's clear to everyone except the newspaper you read this morning. It's clear to everyone except the television broadcast you watched this morning. And it's clear to everyone except the politician who lied to you today, yesterday, and will again tomorrow. We'll be discussing with really outstanding guests this evening and taking your calls. Your calls, by the way, should now begin to be made from a new number. I'm going to read it out to you many times so that you have it on your notepad by the side of your television. In the US, the number from now on will be +1 855 50 MOATS, MOATS, or 855 50 66287. In Britain and Ireland, the new number will be 0800 229 4411. The worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. The old numbers will work for a couple of weeks, but please start dialing the new numbers. Now, you may be asking why we are holding the MOATS at the normal time, clashing with the World Cup final. There are a number of reasons for that, some logistical, but others merely personal. As a football fan, as fanatical as anybody on the planet, I completely lost interest in the World Cup quite a long time ago. I feared everything that has happened. I feared that Donald Trump would hijack the World Cup and hijack the World Cup final, and he's about to do so tonight. As I said, the prospect of him handing over the World Cup to the Spanish team, given the state of relations between America and Spain, is, of course, an unpalatable one for him. But if I know Donald Trump, and if I know Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, that's an outcome extremely unlikely to take place. They haven't come all this way. They haven't done all this to see Argentina lose the World Cup in the final 90 minutes or so. Although the 90 minutes will feel like a lot longer because the United States government, not the football authorities, has changed the rules of football multiple times in the course of this tournament. Famously, they banned players, coaches, and government officials from all the countries that they didn't like. They banned players, officials, and referees from black countries in the global south, making it virtually impossible for anyone not already inside the United States to support their team. They intervened and got a red card offence reversed so that the player who'd been ordered off from the United States football team was reinstated for the next match. A blatant rigging of the rules. They rigged the box that Argentina were drawn from so that Argentina's process to the final of the World Cup was supposed to be flawless and without too much difficulty. When it turned out that teams like Egypt and Morocco did actually prove more difficult than anticipated, they merely rigged the refereeing. The refereeing throughout has been a scandal that will be remembered forevermore. This will be remembered as the Trump World Cup. This will be remembered as the Epstein World Cup. Donald Trump's proximity to the Epstein class is now surely understood by every sentient being in the world. And they have hijacked the beautiful game. They have hijacked the World Cup, the apogee of that beautiful game. They have destroyed it with their water breaks, with their half time. Anyone who knows anything about physical activity, and clearly that does not include Donald Trump, his bone spurs have always got in the way of anything like fighting, but not golf. Donald Trump, I saw him in the helicopter the other day, he's bound to be asking Qatar for a bigger helicopter sometime soon because he has become literally elephantine. And he takes good care to avoid the camera angles that will show it clearly as much as he can. They have destroyed football. They have destroyed the World Cup. And there's only one way that that can be resolved. And that is the removal of Infantino. As soon as the World Cup is over, the removal of Infantino as the boss of FIFA. Now, I have alluded several times, let me do so more pointedly than before, to a scandal that I'm in possession of, involving a young man and sexual molestation, more than molestation, sexual assault and gag orders, non-disclosure agreements, bribery of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I am in possession of those facts, Mr. Infantino. I'm on your trail, and that trail leads directly to you personally. And very soon, I'll be in a position to broadcast material that if you have not been removed before, you surely will after you've heard what I've got to say. Let's now hear what the maestro, Max Blumenthal, has to say right after this short break. Stay tuned. My grandson, Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age, and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
And the moats came up like thunder out of China across the bay. That's right, we're live again from China in the middle of the night. That's the sacrifice I make for you. I'm missing the World Cup final, and I'm going to be broadcasting until 4 o'clock in the morning, just so that the moats can go on. Should the IDF be a proscribed organization, is the poll question tonight. You can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. Still more than half of you who watch on YouTube haven't subscribed to my channel, which is something I simply don't understand. When I tell you it will really help me algorithmically to get to 1 million subscribers, please believe me, that's not BS. And if you are one of the elite supporters of the mother of all talk shows on patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote there. Let me remind you again, if you're phoning in the show and we get many hundreds of calls per show, then here are the new numbers. +1 855 50 MOATS, MOATS. That's +1 855 50 MOATS, or 855 50 66 287. In Britain and Ireland, it's still free, of course, toll free in the US and Canada, and free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0800 229 4411. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Max Blumenthal is the author, journalist, editor at the Grayzone News, but that's like saying that Cristiano Ronaldo is a footballer. Max Blumenthal is by far and away the most courageous, the most eloquent, the best informed journalist in all of the United States of America. And the Grayzone News is the paper of record. It's not, of course, on paper, but it is online. And if you don't follow the Grayzone News as assiduously as me, then you are losing out. Max Blumenthal, like me, was pulled at the airport in the United States and was deprived of all of his devices, as were Gayatri and me. Telephones and laptops, something that should never happen to a journalist, something that should never happen to a lawyer, something that should never have happened to me. It is unlawful, at least in the United States with its First Amendment protection, to effectively steal, to effectively raid the contact books and the notes of a practicing journalist. But it happened to Max Blumenthal, and it happened for no other reason. Not that it was a crime under US law to be reporting from the funeral of Ayatollah Khamenei. It clearly wasn't. CNN were reporting from the funeral of Dr. Khamenei. The issue was not that Max Blumenthal was reporting from the funeral, but that he was reporting the facts which didn't suit the mainstream media, didn't suit the political class. He's taking them to court, or someone is, on his behalf. Let's hear what his prospects of success are right up top. Max Blumenthal, most welcome again to the mother of all talk shows. Let's start. You're a modest fellow, you don't like to talk about yourself, but what happened to you is clearly of some moment, not just for you, but for journalists everywhere, free citizens of the world everywhere. What happened?
Well, I went to Tehran, Iran on July 4th. Lack of Independence Day in Israel-influenced United States. Arrived there to report on the largest gathering in human history, the funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated by the U.S.-Israeli coalition in his office on February 28th. I was there to report on the war. I was there to visit the sites of U.S.-Israeli atrocities. And obviously this was a threat to the main element controlling the Trump administration, because I immediately came under attack from Israel-aligned or simply Israeli elements that were painting me not as a journalist, but as some kind of extremist who had gone there to pay homage to Khamenei, which, even if it were true, would not have, I still would have had constitutional protections to do that. But that's not what I was doing. I was credentialed with a press visa. I participated in events with the, international mainstream press corps, and I did nothing but report from there. When I returned, and we'll talk about the pressure campaign behind this, but when I returned home on July 10th, arrived at Dulles International Airport, I was subjected to secondary screening, interrogation, and I had my devices seized, just phones. My laptop was not taken. I had a digital camera that I was using, was not taken, which is very clearly evidence that the government was not seeking evidence of any criminal activity, was not seeking evidence of anything illicit, and was simply seeking access to my sources, my contacts, and seeking to satisfy the malign Israeli apartheid government and its cutouts, which had been pressuring the Israeli-controlled Trump administration to do this to me. And so as my phone was held throughout the week, or phones were held throughout the week, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, led by its new president, Janine Eunice, filed a lawsuit against Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen, demanding my phones back and alleging that I had been targeted for viewpoint discrimination and targeted for my reporting in violation of my First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights, two things that you unfortunately don't have there in the authoritarian UK. Soon after the lawsuit was filed, I received a call from the CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, telling me that my phones were ready for me at the airport to retrieve. There was a lot of media attention. There was this lawsuit. The Department of Homeland Security was going to have to go before a judge. And so they turned my phones over. I see a clear connection there. This is just my opinion. I see a clear connection. However, the case that we have filed, that the ADC has filed with its team of advocates, real advocates of the people here, advocates of the Constitution, doing the most American thing possible, is not moot, because we are still seeking any data or copies or information that the U.S. government took from my phone. So the case continues. I do have my phones. The government has not responded, and the Israel-aligned elements continue their meltdown and continue to target me to this day. And it's very clear to me that they were responsible for this unconstitutional, illegal seizure of my devices.
Quite so, and you're right to concentrate now on forcing them to destroy the data that they took from your devices, because of course that was, in our case, the principal reason for taking the devices in the first place. They knew that they would have to give the phones back, but they now had access to every person who ever helped us with information, every insider, whistleblower, everyone. For example, this is the 23rd anniversary of the death of Dr. David Kelly, almost certainly in the hands of the security services. We had sources in the security services. The police now have those sources from our devices. Of course, there were code names used, but inevitably, clever people can get leads from the most well-disguised piece of information, and whistleblowers may, in the end, be under arrest, and many, many other things. So you have to try and make it impossible for them to use the data that they stole from your telephones. But you made the allusion there more than once to the machine that moved into action. Not just against you, by the way, but Jackson Hinkle, for example, I saw singled out for particular treatment, another American journalist and broadcaster who was at the funeral. This machine moved into action almost as if the huge change which is occurring in the United States on attitudes to Israel hadn't happened. So they haven't lost their mojo, have they? They're still confident that they control levers in power.
And they're proving it not just through their ability to get the U.S. government to harass me for doing journalism, which is not just inconvenient to the U.S. war machine, but to the Israeli apparatus, which has guided the U.S. into war and which has prompted several U.S. service members to die for Israel at an airbase, a U.S. airbase in Jordan, which is maintained obviously to protect Israel from the consequences of the wars it starts. So it's really clear the Trump administration is in thrall, not just to the Israel lobby, but to the Israeli government. The Israeli government is running the largest influence operation in history in the United States, and the mainstream press is starting to pay attention to what we've been calling out for months and months and months, where Trump's former chief of staff, Brad Parscale, is paying $50 million to influencers. And I would assume one of those influencers is botched plastic surgery victim and Ku Klux Karen Laura Loomer, who seems to be taking credit for convincing the Trump administration to harass me. As soon as I arrived in Iran and began reporting from the funeral, again, reporting, pure reporting, she demanded that upon my return, U.S. Marshals haul me off the plane and arrest me, and if U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary and noted military imposter Mark Wayne Mullen is worth anything, that he will authorize this. And she continued to attack me, calling for me to be arrested for the crime of journalism. It seemed like there were some forces guiding her. There were some things I doubt she understood. She was calling for the Treasury Secretary to authorize a FinCEN investigation of my finances to see if Iran was paying me for this. Why would I have to be paid for it? Why would I need to go all the way to Iran to collect money? It made no sense. I wasn't paid for it. But she was using this terminology, which seemed to be fed to her. It seemed like she was targeting me on behalf of some kind of client, probably a foreign government that holds millions of people under occupation. And now that I'm back, she continues to take credit and declared that she reported me to the State Department, where she has called for Marco Rubio to pull my passport, which is basically impossible and illegal. It even says on the back of your passport that the U.S. government can't do that. But for what crime? What crime have I committed? They went on some kind of fishing expedition into my phones, maybe looking for some crime. But it's very clear when you have this figure who's responsible is credited with the firing of, I call them a figure because I can't determine if they're a demon or a human, but this figure who is responsible for the firing of so many Trump administration officials, including the top Iran expert at the National Security Council, Nate Swanson, who had warned that if the U.S. attacked Iran, that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. Nate Swanson, that this figure has influence in the Trump administration. This figure has even been rumored by the comedian Bill Maher to be Trump's paramour. And so it stands to reason that the Trump administration was responding to an unregistered foreign agent, or likely unregistered foreign agent like Laura Loomer, in harassing me. And that confirms the basis of the ADC's lawsuit on my behalf, which is that I was targeted with viewpoint discrimination to an illegal seizure of my devices, that the U.S. government violated the Constitution on behalf of an Israeli-backed figure and because of my views and because of my journalism. And so the more that this Ku Klux Karen keeps talking, the more it validates and confirms the basis of our lawsuit. So I hope they keep running their mouth. There was one other group which targeted me as well. It's called Canary Mission. Canary Mission is not an American group. It is staffed entirely by American traders who took up Israeli citizenship and went to work for a nonprofit called Megamat Shalom, based in Jerusalem, which has been primarily sponsored by the Wexner Foundation. The Wexner Foundation is named for its main patron, Les Wexner, who is the closest friend and associate of Jeffrey Epstein, and Jeffrey Epstein, until his untimely death, was a trustee of that foundation. The Megamat Foundation, based in Jerusalem, uses the Canary Mission as a front group since 2015 to destroy the lives of college students participating in Palestine solidarity activity. And they turned their Uzis and other Israeli weapons on me and influencers who were in Iran, claiming that, essentially I'm not a reporter. But once again, another Israeli, not just an Israeli aligned entity, but an Israeli entity prompting the Trump administration to target me with unconstitutional, illegal harassment and the seizure of my communications devices to violate my right to protect my sources and methods. And why would I suspect Canary Mission of having that level of influence? Because it has been confirmed that the Canary Mission helped the Trump administration identify student green card holders to arrest for participating in Palestine solidarity activity. So they have that power in this Israeli-occupied administration, which is now getting U.S. soldiers killed for Israel.
We'll come to them in just a minute, but so it's quite helpful that they're so transparent in their financial trail. Leslie Wexner, goodness gracious me. But it's not working, is it? Eve, I watched the interview on the Joe Rogan show of the Vice President of the United States, who was saying things that you and I were saying many years ago and were roundly attacked for saying. I found it an extraordinary interview. I've watched it twice. J.D. Vance admitted essentially that this is a war for Israel, that Israel is involved in mass influence campaigns, not just to keep the war effort going, but to target those who oppose it and to buttress Israel's failing levels of support in the United States. Were you surprised at Vance doing that?
No, I just thought it was pathetic that J.D. Vance said, well, everyone tries to influence the United States, as though this were not some kind of disproportionate level of malign influence, which is completely guiding every aspect of the Trump administration's policy in the region, and which has overtaken his Justice Department, and which is guiding so many other aspects of Trump policy. And J.D. Vance knows that. He's just too weak to stand in the way. He never stood in the way of this. So now the United States is helping Israel offset the consequences of the war that it launched with the second phase of this failed Epstein-Fury operation. I don't actually know what this stage is called. This stage, I don't know, it's like the various stages of grief. And the Trump administration is in denial that it has been defeated. And all it can do is attack civilian targets like bridges that provide civilians access from town to town in Iran, or a water pump in Khuzestan, which supplied 10,000 people with water. This isn't going to win the war. They're not knocking out the missile cities. They're not going to destroy Pickaxe Mountain, which is Donald Trump's white whale. This is not going to happen. What is going to happen is U.S. bases will continue to get hammered. Donald Trump will abandon the Gulf states, which are the U.S.'s main vassals in the region. The price of oil will continue to go up. The Strait of Hormuz will remain closed to shipping, which will mean fertilizer and other necessary goods for producing food will become extremely costly. And Americans and average Europeans and people all across Asia and Africa will be the ones who pay, while Donald Trump and his class of Epstein insiders will make millions, if not billions, on insider trading. The Iranian government has estimated Trump insider earnings at $9 billion on insider trading around the war. No one even knows at this point in the United States why the U.S. is still at war with Iran. It started out with desire to prompt regime change, to free the Iranian public. Now they're attacking the Iranian public, killing the Iranian public. It started out with a call to end Iran's nuclear program. Now it's focused solely around southern Iran and the Strait of Hormuz to return the world to the status quo ante before Epstein-Fury began on February 28th, when the Strait of Hormuz was opened. So this is just another round of cataclysmic failure by the Trump administration, and a new poll is out today. I think it's a CBS poll. I can't remember who the pollster is, but I know for a fact that it shows that only 26% of the American public think that this war is actually worth it. 63% oppose it. And that aligns with the level of Americans who think that the level of support for Israel by the U.S. is worth it. So right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel, they're resting on their laurels. They're not even allowing the U.S. to use Ben Gurion Airport to store their land in-air refueling tankers. They're treating the U.S. like a client state. They're treating the U.S. like a puppet. The mask is completely off. The cost of the special relationship is too high for the American public, and everyone can see it. And the only people online or anywhere in the United States who actually believe in this psychotic war in which American service members are dying for Israel are either dyed-in-the-wool Zionist fanatics or paid propagandists. And I'd say the latter category is getting much larger than the first.
Will it bring? Is it a gear change that Americans are beginning to die and shed their blood in very significant numbers? The attack on the base, which we were always told by the Jordanian authorities didn't actually exist, but Trump has now said was hit repeatedly. Will that begin to change gears?
Well, it looks like Iran and its military, specifically the IRGC, has an actual strategy here. Why is it hitting the Muafiq Salti base? Because it's the final layer of the defense of Israel. Jordan is run by a half-British Hashemite neo-colonial stooge who speaks Arabic with a British accent, has blue eyes, and runs a warehouse repository of Palestinian surplus humanity for Israel. He runs his intelligence services merged with Israel. His country exists solely for Israel's strategic depth, and Iran is now targeting that because they expect correctly that Israel will soon enter the fray. And without that final layer of interception defense, Israel will become that much more vulnerable. They're also targeting U.S. military bases again and again. I mean, Erbil has become this punching bag for Iran, where they just keep hammering that, and they're hitting the Kurdish proxies in Suleimania. They're shredding them because they understand what the next phase is. And what is the U.S. strategy here? The U.S. strategy seems to be to try to take out radar systems around Sirik and Kish Island and prevent Iran from being able to enforce the control over the Strait of Hormuz. It's not working. It's very easy to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. You don't need advanced systems. And so Pete Hegseth tweeted out an image of the civilian maritime control tower in Chabahar being taken down. This has nothing to do with Iran's military control over the Strait of Hormuz. It's just sadism and terrorism for its own sake. So I don't know what no one knows what the U.S. strategy is here, but Iran clearly has one, and it's preparing for the next phase, and I would expect Israel to get involved this week. I actually see escalation continuing. I don't know if we're in a situation of escalation for de-escalation, but I do think Iran is starting to reclaim escalation dominance, or at least escalation parity, and you can start to see the panic within the national security state in the U.S. through a Wall Street Journal article in which officials are complaining that Iran is actually using more advanced missiles, and it has received intelligence from China and Russia on the location of U.S. troops. We knew that they were going to do this during the last round. Everyone who was paying attention knew that. Everyone who was paying attention knew that Iran was using older, for example, Imad ballistic missiles, and it wasn't using the hypersonic Khorramshahr and the other more advanced missiles, and that they were going to do this. But the U.S. officials seem stunned. It's as if there's no strategy here. They're just attacking bridges for their own sake. And the Iranian public, I was there, so I understand this. They're not going to be broken by being terrorized. They're not going to be cowed, and they're more confident than ever in their military, and even middle-class people who opposed the Islamic Republic before February 28th. they are starting to see through a lot of the propaganda before and have this kind of confidence that it can fend off these attacks. So Iran is not going to back down, and yet the U.S. public has no appetite for this war and does not understand what it's about.
The Iranian ambassador in Moscow, a man I know, he said today to my friend Rick Sanchez that he very much hoped that the US would invade, because then it would become a more manly war. He means, of course, up close and personal, not death delivered from the skies, but a fight in which you can see the whites of the attacker's eyes. You cannot be serious if you say that Donald Trump, with this tiny amount of public support, not just for the war, but a very rapidly declining public support in general, has the means, never mind the will, to invade Iran. At least that's how it looks to me. How does it look to you?
Well, if the U.S. does have any advantage, it's air power. I mean, because of sanctions, Iran can't have a military, cannot produce advanced aircraft platforms. That's why it relies so heavily on ballistic missiles. And it has the best ballistic missile program, at least mid-range, short-range in the world. So the U.S. would not be playing to its strength with the ground war. It would be playing to Iran's strength. And if a ground operation is authorized, okay, let's say the Marines, like 30,000, 50,000 Marines and some special forces, can establish a beachhead at Chabahar, which is flat land along the strait. That would be the best place for them to land. How are they going to hold that against FPV drones, against mobile artillery, against ballistic missiles, against face-to-face fighting with a million-man army, which has learned the lessons of the failures of the Arab armies of the past? This is not a post-colonial Arab army that's just filled with, what the Egyptians would call like chiri-biri, like men who don't want to fight, who are conscripted and live off small blocks of cheese and sweaty tents. Like, that's not the Iranian army. It's a pretty good army that does have its own special forces and is prepared for this kind of fight. And they are much more motivated and willing to take losses than the United States. I interviewed while in Tehran, and I might have already published it, but I'll be publishing it today. This would be part 2 of our interview with Mostafa Hoshesh, who is one of the most well-connected commentators and journalists, especially in the military realm inside Iran. And he actually referred to new capabilities and new weapons that have not been seen before that Iran's ground troops possess. So I think this would be a disaster for the United States. The U.S. hasn't really lost that many soldiers at this point, although over 400 have been injured, and I think some of the losses are being hidden. But once you start seeing the kind of Iraq level losses or higher, that's going to be the end of Donald Trump. And the Democrats could even turn loose their constituents into the streets, the no kings kind of constituents, for major anti-war protests. The unions could come out. Right now, there's no anti-war activity in the streets, but that would be a disaster for Donald Trump, even beyond the disaster that he has already unleashed. At the same time, how else are they going to get the Strait of Hormuz open? Like, what else are they going to do? So I think Donald Trump is in a major military quandary from which he has no exit.
Finally, Max, and I'm grateful for your time, I postulated in my monologue that Kuwait's role in the last few days, last week or 10 days, has been so egregious and has enraged the Iranians so much that the option of a land invasion by Iran of Kuwait has moved back onto the military political agenda. It will be a very easy thing to achieve. The Kuwaitis don't have an army to speak of, and the rulers would flee. just as quickly as they did when Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1991. So have you any inkling of whether that might happen, and if so, what the impact of it would be?
Well, Kuwait has made this this devil's bargain with the United States since the U.S. rescued it from Saddam Hussein's army during the first Gulf War, that the U.S. would protect its oil fields from hostile forces, whether in Iraq or Iran, and that Kuwait would provide oil to the U.S. at a low price and as part of OPEC, and that Kuwait would allow the U.S. to operate its forward military systems from its territory. And we see that right now with the HIMARS attacks from Kuwaiti territory on Iran's civilian infrastructure. And what is Kuwait getting in return? Is the U.S. actually protecting them? Has the U.S. actually been able to protect Kuwait from Iranian ballistic missile attacks? No. And the ballistic missile attacks, fortunately for Kuwait, are being directed mainly at like the Ali al-Salam base, U.S. bases in Kuwait, not at civilians. This is an important point that can't be emphasized enough. Since the U.S. and Israel imposed war on Iran on February 28th, Iran has killed less than 20 people in the Gulf states, less than 20 civilians. And the U.S. and Israel have killed over 3,500 Iranian civilians. So this is the difference, and Kuwait is fortunate for that. However, Kuwait's security has been shattered, as has this kind of racket that the United States imposed. Their oil infrastructure is not going to be protected. And to the extent that they're providing territory for the U.S. to launch HIMARS attacks on Iran's desalination plants, their own desalination plants will be hit. That's why Kuwait's international airport is flooded with people seeking to escape. That's the first stage in destabilization. There's another factor. 30% of Kuwait's population is Shia. They are oppressed, like the Saudi population in Qatif, who are Shia, and have seen their leadership executed. Remember Nimr al-Nimr being beheaded? Bahrain's Shia population is over 40%. So these states could quickly collapse. They're not real states. They don't have militaries. They're just basically monarchies with U.S. military bases. And Iran knows that, and I don't think we've seen the full extent of Iranian escalation. I think Kuwait needs to be really careful going forward about allowing the U.S. to attack Iranian oil infrastructure and desalination plants. Iran gave them 4 days before they retaliated, and I think it's going to get more intense.
Good luck, stay safe, Max Blumenthal. The world needs you. Thanks very much for joining us again on the mother of all talk shows. Max Blumenthal, author, journalist, editor at the peerless Grayzone News. Let me take a quick break, then your calls. Stay tuned.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You're being thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published. But actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
I hope they know at the headquarters of the British Security Services that they're on my case, but I'm also on their case. And we will never give up on the pursuit of justice for the strange death of Dr. David Kelly, almost certainly when he was in their custody, if you get my drift. And I did mention before about the documentary I'm now working on. It's called The Stranglers, and they know what I mean. David Kelly died 23 years ago. That was an excerpt from the film made by Gayatri and myself and directed by the wonderful Irish film director Sean Murray. It's now free on my YouTube channel, the one you haven't yet subscribed to. You can view it entirely free on my YouTube channel, as you have long been able to do on my patreon.com/George Galloway. Should the IDF be a proscribed organization? There are quite a number of people don't know what proscribed means. So let me explain. A proscribed organization is an organization that you may not, on pain of imprisonment, say anything positive about, that you may not, in any circumstances, proscribed organization and organization that may not be quoted, like Winnie Mandela was not allowed to be quoted during the apartheid period. She became a non-person. So if you're a proscribed organization, not only are you disappeared, but anyone who can be alleged even as having any kind of positive feelings about is in big trouble. So I'm not, for example, allowed to say anything about a major component of the Iranian military who are engaged in a war, an all-out war, and I'm a journalist and broadcaster. I may not say any, I may not mention their name. Max Blumenthal did, but I did not. I may not mention their name because that could trigger a prosecution for breaching the proscribed nature of that organization. And the Lebanese resistance is another proscribed organization. Most of the organizations in the Palestinian resistance are proscribed organizations. Yet the Israel occupation force is not just allowed to be quoted, it's the only source that is quoted as official. And if you quote a source from the resistance, just quote them. Don't back them or support them, just quote them. You are committing a criminal offense in Britain. So that's what a proscribed organization means. But my apologies, we should have realized that that could cause some confusion. But nearly 20,000 people have voted, and almost everybody thinks that the IDF should be a proscribed organization. New caller, Ghazi in England, in Peterborough, on Iran, Kurdistan. Ghazi, welcome.
Good evening, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, good. Thank you. What do you want to say?
One question is this: is it not time for Arabs and the Turks and Iranians to accept Israel as a state? The second question, is it not time for Israeli society move out ghetto mindset? Is it not time yet?
Is that it?
Second question was...
Well, I'm sorry you wasted your first-time call, Ghazi, with a statement or questions as asinine as those. Is it not time for the Arabs, the Kurds, and the Iranians to recognize the state of Israel that is bombing, shelling, occupying, and making miserable the lives of all of its neighbors and all of the people who have the misfortune to have been trapped in their settler apartheid state? Isn't it time, you ask, for a state which is explicitly practicing the kind of occupation policies the Nazis practiced in occupied Europe, East and West, during the Second World War? Is it not time, you ask, for people to accept that the Palestinian people must move to the museum, that they must leave, those remaining must leave their own land to European settlers, North American settlers, who are the descendants of European Jewish converts, to exercise their supposed rights to come and take their land, steal their house, and harvest their crops? Is it not time for the people of Lebanon to accept repeated, atrocious Israeli occupation of their land? Is it not time for the Syrian people to accept Israeli occupation of their land, the Golan Heights, since 1967, stolen by Israel and annexed by Israel? Is it not time for the Muslims of the world to recognize Zionist suzerainty over the holy places in Jerusalem, Christian and Muslim, to be in the hands of Ben Gvir as to whether or not you can pray in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the second, third holiest shrine in Islam? Is it not time for people to accept that a state run by Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and the killer shark Netanyahu are top dogs, are kings? Are you real, Ghazi? Let me give you the last word.
Okay, my question was, the second question was, is it not time for Israeli society to recognize, Israeli society to move out the ghetto mindset? That's my one question.
That's a very vague, that's a very vague formulation. You want universal recognition of Smotrich and Netanyahu and the legitimacy of their state, and all you ask in return is that they move out of their ghetto mentality. Be a bit more specific, Ghazi.
My other question is regarding Kurdish issues. What is your opinion regarding the Kurdish and Kurdish independence and Kurdistan to be a state to recognize?
I didn't realize. I was trying to puzzle how such tangled distortion of a telephone call could possibly have arisen from somebody called Ghazi, but you just answered my conundrum. As to the Kurdish people, in which I infer now that you are one. They have allowed themselves to be used, put on the shelf, taken off the shelf, put back on the shelf, taken off the shelf. They have allowed themselves to be used against Iraq. They are now allowing themselves to be used against Iran. They have allowed themselves to be used against Turkey. They allow themselves to be used against Syria. They are used by whomever picks them up. There's a word for that kind of thing, Ghazi. It's not a pleasant one. I'll spare you the use of it. And thank you for your call. On YouTube, you can leave comments. You can scan the QR code and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. I'll try and read it out. Cesar Alberto Guzman says, Max is the bravest journalist in America and the best. And Ned Kelly, 33, says they're coming for both of you. Max will end in the pen. Gigi is on the British government hit list. This is sad, but you F with the global mafia. It's only time. Well, I know what they did to David Kelly, you see, so my eyes are wide open. I'm protected in the People's Republic of China and don't intend willingly to offer myself up to the British government's hit list. But if they hit me, well, the views of all my videos and the following on YouTube and on every platform will, of course, exponentially rise. They will not silence me by hitting me. They will amplify me by hitting me. I'll be a martyr, and martyrs are powerful things. Hassana Hunter says, out of duty, I've not watched a single World Cup match, Mr. George. Well, I know how you feel. I did fully intend that myself. I've watched only 2, but I'm definitely going to watch back the England-France 3rd, 4th place playoff yesterday, in which England played so well, scoring 6 goals. It makes you wonder why the guys that scored the goals were so badly treated by the manager, Thomas Tuchel, in the semi-final. Tam McIntosh says, remember, who sold arms to the Argentinians during the Falklands War? All these British patriots don't remember or deliberately overlook that Israel supplied the arms to the fascist junta in Argentina that killed significant numbers of British service personnel during the Falklands War, and lied persistently to the British government of Margaret Thatcher, great supporter of theirs, lied repeatedly that they were not supplying weapons and ammunition to the Argentine junta, when now declassified material makes very clear that they were, and that they were lying through their teeth. And yet you so often see people who purport at least to be British patriots and great fans of Israel with the flags of both in their avatars. Karaoke Star says, good evening, Mr. Galloway. Is it true the Messi has ex-IDF as his personal security? I wouldn't know about that, but he's definitely a big fan of Israel and Netanyahu. Mick Pebs MC says Argentina supports Israel and therefore they will hand the World Cup in their hands, unlike Spain. They are with Palestine. It's like the World Cup is between Israel and Palestine. Well, I hope Palestine wins. JHNT4 Defender 90 says, really love the hat, George. Been discussing with my wife. We reckon it's a Derby stroke bowler. It is a new hat. I rather like it. I'm glad that you do. How you would define it, I'm not sure. I like to think of it as a UB40 type bowler. On line 2 is KG in Seattle, and he wants to talk about profits over people. Go ahead, KG.
Yo, George, thank you very much for having me on. It's an honor. First of all, it's going to be tough for me to follow up with anything that you said before, but what do you think about this outbreak of Tyler Farms? You know, there's reports that they knew 6 weeks before making a public announcement, and there's questions about, once again, who knew in advance, and whether it's institutional managers that sacrificed our safety to close their positions before this announcement was made publicly, right? They've done this before. So this is a history where it seems like as though they're sacrificing the public and building in these profits and lawsuits, because Taylor Farms last year settled the case for $1 million for a fatality, for a workplace fatality in New Jersey with 16 violations. They've had a ongoing labor abuse case and union busting since 2014 when The Guardian published an article on them. So that just tells you that it's gone past our borders and has now started to seep into the newsrooms of the UK because of this abuse for labor. And that goes back to my question about, do you think that this is a pattern? Warehouses being burned down, potential outbreaks, maybe or maybe not by resentful employees. Because if you look at the Norfolk Southern case in 2021, where the train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, with the huge chemical spill, we cannot forget that there was a major labor issue that Biden stepped in to ensure that Norfolk Southern did not have to pay paid sick leave for the workers from COVID. And immediately after that, you see this massive spill in East Palestine, Ohio. Now, I know it's a stretch to say that these are all resentful employees, but when you're talking about massive income disparity, record results on the stock market, all arbitraged off of labor and outsourcing of cheap labor, right? How can you not assume that this is a continuation that is going to result in more potential accidents and acts of vengeance? Do you see what I'm saying, sir? How far off am I, do you think?
Of course I see. I see and I understand. I don't know the case to which you refer, but I understand, of course, what's going on in the world. Even Ned Ludd, who's passed into history as some kind of nihilistic wrecker, and his movement, the Luddites, have been widely traduced in history. All that the Luddites were saying was, if you're going to develop new technology, you're going to have to look after us, those who you employed to use the old technology. We are humans, and machinery and resources must serve humanity, not the other way around. And this is, of course, acutely now in the news with the statements broadcast this week by Xi Jinping, the president of China, and me in China at a major AI convention, in Xi Jinping's case, and in CGTN debate. In my case, we were both making exactly the same point, and it's the point that I just made to you. Technology is great. We love it. We want more of it. We want rest for the worker, and we want more leisure for the worker. But if the worker is penurized, is beggared by the advance of new technologies, then you can't blame the worker for being upset about it. He has a family to feed. The worker has children that are hungry and have to have their dinner. He has to pay his rent, has to pay his mortgage, the grip of death, as it means in French. So these issues that you raise are important. I'm against individual acts of violence. against people or property. I'm against burning things down. But you can hardly be surprised if people who are being ruthlessly exploited cut up rough about it. That's a lesson learned in many places, not the least of which is Ireland, from which the great Chay Bowes will be with us very shortly. A big thanks to some of tonight's top Moats supporters who backed the programme through our website. That's moats.tv. Don't leave me tonight without leaving at least £1, €1 or $1. Moats.tv. But the top donors tonight so far are L. Findlay, Claude Allen, Jack Ryan, Martin Davey, and Elizabeth Morley, a very regular donor indeed. So big thanks to all of you. All you have to do, visit moats.tv and click the Donate Now button. Now, I think we're joined by the one and only Irishman in Moscow, Chay Bowes, who knows more about international politics than almost anyone else in the world. Chay, I was talking to our friend Max Blumenthal earlier about the Persian Gulf War in particular, but with you I'd like to concentrate on what I describe as a gear change that has occurred, and indeed which you predicted and I predicted in the NATO war against Russia, over the dead bodies of now 1 million Ukrainians. It does seem to me that the kind of war now being fought by Russia is different to that which they were waging just a few weeks ago. What do you think?
Well, George, I think you're right. I think there's definitely been a gear change, a shift in the sort of positioning of the Russian state when it comes to the prosecution of this conflict, if you like. Something interesting, which particularly sort of, for me, coloured and signposted that this was going to happen, was about 10 days ago when the Kremlin spokesman referred to this as a war. Dmitry Peskov, who is, so typically calm and Russian about this. We will respond in time. You've heard Peskov speak, but he referred to this as a war. And I think now with these Western powers, with the Western powers, rolling these snowballs for Kiev to throw ever more aggressively, even the concept of trying to conceal the intimate nature by which this war against Russia is being prosecuted by NATO and by the United States of America, by the United Kingdom. Lots of talk of an Ankara, spirit of Ankara. I think that's evaporated now. The British have remained absolutely steadfast in their prosecution of this war against Russia via their Ukrainian proxy. So I think when he mentioned this, he said this is a war. I think many people, who are tuned into this and watch for the minutiae, because the small things matter when it comes to Russia, as you know. Language is very important. I think people sensed that something was going to change, and we saw that on the battlefield. We saw a huge ramping up in the striking of energy infrastructure, not just regarding sort of power stations and power facilities, but also fuel stations along this huge nexus, this massive front line, trying to decapitate the ability of the Ukrainians to drive these civilian trucks, which they launched their drones from, closer to the front line into Moscow. And remember, the Ukrainians might launch 700 drones. They might launch, 1,000 drones over a week. They only need 2 or 3 to get through the very good Russian air defenses to get their huge PR opportunity, which may be a burning warehouse like the Russian equivalent of Amazon was recently struck over the last couple of days. A completely civilian target, of course, like a oil depot in St. Petersburg during the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, etc., etc. So I think there's a sense within the Russian population that there's an expectation that the state would, I don't want to use the word punish, but would express the dissatisfaction with the situation by doing things that many people in Russia and many observers think maybe should have been done before. But that also speaks to President Putin's sort of duality in the way he assesses this conflict as an ex-intelligence officer, as a man who spent a lot of time in Germany, whose children were born in Germany while he was based there. He always wanted to keep the avenues open for a diplomatic resolution here. And for the first time in my time here on this occasion in Russia, since the beginning of what is known as the special military operation in 2022, I see that aperture closing quite quickly. And that's got to concern everybody.
Yes, I mean, nobody actually is talking about negotiations. They're talking about a ceasefire in which they will rearm, reorganize, reinforce the war effort for the breakdown of the ceasefire, which they will engineer, because their war aims are clear enough, aren't they? They are to weaken Russia, if possible to balkanize it, to achieve regime change, although they seem to have some idea that if Putin were to fall from power, that some Nick Clegg or someone like him would step forward and take the reins in the Kremlin, when you and I both know that Putin's under pressure, all right, but the pressure he's under is not the kind of pressure that Western governments would like to imagine.
Yeah, this is a very good point. And I only read yesterday a sort of a readout of a speech or comments by a man called Leonid Slutsky, who is essentially the leader of the right in Russia, the political faction, the LDPR. Our viewers won't be familiar with them, but people listen to what this man says. He's got quite a following in the Duma. And he said that the people are expecting Kiev to be punished now. That for every injured Russian, for every Russian that has been lost in battle, the people expect punishment now. And these are things that you wouldn't necessarily have heard in open dialogue in Russia 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And people like Leonid Slutsky, of course, George, could, in theory, replace Vladimir Putin if Mr. Putin was removed in an election. Of course, he would be removed in an election that the West says never happens, because the West could never comprehend the fact that Vladimir Putin had an approval rating among the people of Russia of over 80% for significant periods of time. Currently, it's at about 70, 71, 72%. So his popularity has taken a little bit of a dip. What Western leader could imagine or dream in their wildest fantasy of having a popularity of 71%, George, of course. But in Russia, this is news, because, as you say, this institutionalized selective ignorance in Western, what counts for the Western intelligentsia, for the think tank fantasists in Russia, in London, in the United States equivalent, that everybody in Russia is in some sort of mind-numbing oppression, that they can't speak. And as you know, and I know, every single taxi driver in Moscow wants to tell you their opinion of Mr. Putin, on the war, on Russian history, on who's to blame for, Rasputin's death. I mean, it's very difficult to start a conversation about politics in Russia without, ending up in someone's apartment drinking vodka and eating blini. So this is very much part of the narrative in the West, that everybody here is queuing up to oust Mr. Putin. But what they don't understand is that's not the case. Even Mr. Putin's detractors accept that he's an exceptional statesman and politician, and that he's done a masterful job in rescuing Russia from the precipice of absolute catastrophe in the aftermath, as you know, of the collapse of the Soviet Union. I don't like to call it the collapse of the Soviet Union. I like to call it the destruction of the Soviet Union. Forces within the Soviet Union and without, in my view, contrived to destroy that grand, project, whether you agree or disagree with it. So, in the aftermath of that, Russia went through a horrendous socio-economic catharsis, the convulsionary pains of change, of the influx of capitalism, the rise of the oligarchs. And it was Vladimir Putin who stepped in to stem the tide and to clip the wings of these very, very powerful men. And in many ways saved the state of Russia from what was absolutely certainly going to be a catastrophic collapse. And as you say, potentially a balkanization. Now, Russians remember that here. The detractors, the people who believe in Mr. Putin and believe in the Russian idea of statehood, they all believe and understand what happened in 1991, and nobody wants to return to that. Certainly not with the Western powers who've inflicted such pain on Russia, or attempted to over the last 5 years, in charge of it in the background. So it is possible that a far more radical Russian leader would emerge from either the political sphere or from the financial sphere or from the social sphere to step in. And what would happen? Potentially a mobilization, potentially a declaration of war, where every Ukrainian ship and every allied ship bringing materiel to Ukraine could be sunk by Russia's significant submarine fleet. Let's model it out. If Russia was to declare war on the state of Ukraine, everything would change overnight. You may have 3 million men pouring over the border, and you would then see the full power of the Russian state gearing up into a war economy, not only socially, militarily, but then again politically. And of course, when people in the West see some oil tanks burning in St. Petersburg, or 1,000 kilometers from the front, an oil tank burning, the Russian equivalent of Amazon burning, they very quickly forget that 27 million Soviet people died. Of course, there was 15 Soviet republics, but 60% of those casualties were Russians who died fighting the biggest army that ever took to the field of war in human history. That was Russia who defeated them. As President Putin often reminds people, who stormed the Reichstag? Was it the French? Was it the British? Was it the Americans? No, it was the Russians. So I think the West, in some sort of delusionary, semi-woke, willful ignorance, likes to think that, as they thought at the end of the Soviet Union, that everybody would queue up at the McDonald's or the Burger King, and all would be fine, and we'd all reach some sort of rapprochement with Russia. Russia actually tried to reach rapprochement with the West, as you know, with Mr. Putin handing out the hand of friendship and brotherly interaction with the West, and that hand was slapped away. Mr. Putin has never forgotten that. He attempted to an associate membership of NATO even. He allowed allied planes to cross Russian airspace in the attacks on ISIS in the war on terror, as it was known, which happened to turn out to become a terrorist war on ordinary civilians. Of course, we know that too. But Russia played the role appropriately, and they haven't forgotten that now. And the danger now for the think tank fantasists, as I said, and people like Boris Johnson who want to declare Ukraine as a member of NATO is that kind of mistake, that kind of idiocy, is something that can only be done once. At the start of the Second World War, grave mistakes were made, abandoning Czechoslovakia, allowing Hitler to sort of put pressure on the Russians. This fantasy that the Russians signed a deal, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, before anybody else. In 1935, the Poles signed a deal with the Nazis. The British signed shipping deals with them. It was the West that placated them. And into that gap came this Russian determination. But that determination took time to stimulate. And what I'm seeing now is a really dangerous place where the Western powers who are behind Ukraine, this prostitute state, pardon my language, but I think it's a very appropriate phrase now when you're dealing with Ukraine, because it has no sovereignty. It has abandoned all sort of objectivity when it comes to the plight of its people. Its economy is destroyed. Its population is cast to the four corners of the earth. It's 50% of it is gone, either lost in war or refugees in Europe. Into that sort of vacuum now, there is a real likelihood that political pressure within Russia, and the actual reality of what the West is trying to do is that they may actually get their war with Russia. The problem is, in the modern world and on the modern battlefield,
they may, and be careful what you wish for. The displacement of the Ukrainian conventional military defense, which is losing. You're the one who coined the phrase on here. Ukraine is smaller today than it was yesterday, and it will be smaller again tomorrow. That is rapidly coming true in front of our eyes if one has the ability to read a map, which surprisingly few people nowadays seem to be able to do, is being now replaced by terrorist action, including in Europe. You and I have both been covering the terrorist atrocity that took place in Monaco and the remarkable tapes which were published during the week, which implicate even Zelensky himself in these terrorist acts. Tell the viewers about that, if you will.
Yeah, well, this is just kind of remarkable stuff. I mean, it's almost like a bad, third part in a spy movie. You know, the bit that nobody goes to watch because it's so remarkable that this could actually happen at the heart of Europe. Essentially, what happened was a Ukrainian oligarch was targeted in a remote controlled bombing. Now, very tragically, his partner and his son were also critically injured. Nobody was killed. Remarkably, how that happened is beyond me when you see the footage of the actual strike. It was carried out by a lady called Anastasia Berezovskaya, who was recruited by the Ukrainian intelligence services, remarkably. Dispatched to Monaco, the Principality of Monaco, which, by the way, had never, ever suffered any kind of terrorist attack until the Ukrainians arrived there. Now, there's a huge expat, if you like, Ukrainian cadre in Monaco. Surprise, surprise, huge wealth. And, you know, the vehicles can be seen and all the accoutrement of this sort of Ukrainian population. This man, Germalayev, was targeted. And he was targeted because alongside becoming a sort of a latent critic of our friend Vladimir Zelensky, he also was, we believe, running these prescribed call centers for scamming people in Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and in Eastern Europe in particular. A multi-million euro scam with these call centers, fake call centers. Now, apparently there'd been an internal argument about this. Germalayev fell out with his SBU handlers, which is the Ukrainian intelligence service, and he was marked to be assassinated. Now, this isn't the first assassination in Europe. We saw one in Spain of a prominent critic, but that was more political. This was about money, because the nexus between Ukraine security services and organized crime are, it's a tree and a railing. They're completely inseparable, George. This assassination happens. Le Figaro, nonetheless, George, declares that this was the Ukrainian security services that had committed this act of terror in the center of Monaco, critically injuring these three people. The perpetrator, by the time Interpol had issued a red notice for this lady, Anastasia Berezovskaya, she was already in Kiev, back with her handlers. But she wasn't going to survive more than 24 hours because she was then brutally executed with 2 gunshots to the head, at least, in a basement in Kiev by her handler. The same man who recruited her actually executed her. Some believe because she failed in her task of killing this man, Germalayev. Others believe because they just wanted to tie up loose ends. That's the remarkable reality about what is being funded now by all of our viewers, taxpayers' dollars in the United States, euros in the European community. And you know that this is happening. And you know how serious this is because of its absence from the BBC, its absence from the CNN, its absence from RTE, France 24, Deutsche Welle. None of them have covered this remarkable story. And the evidence is freely available. It's on your X account, it's on YouTube, it's on mine. The actual recordings of this man, Zinkovic, an SBU colonel, openly discussing how he's traveling the world, executing people. He also mentions that Mr. Zelensky loves to accumulate civilian casualties in order to perpetuate this ideology that Russia, is striking civilian targets. Now, if Russia, of course, is striking civilian targets, they've got the most cockeyed targeting men in history, because you just need to compare what Gaza looks like and what Kiev looks like on a Saturday night, and your answer will be found. But it's a remarkable revelation, George.
Mind you, Chay, the people in Ukraine are beginning to turn. Mass demonstrations. Zelensky has dismissed his defense minister, and he's talking openly about removing the military chief of staff. In the beginning, it was small, but the last pictures I saw, it looked pretty big to me. How much danger is Zelensky in of overthrow within Ukraine?
Well, it's two things I'd say about that, which I think are interesting. How do these people get onto the streets to protest? Because Ukraine is a dictatorship. It's a country run under martial law. It's a police state. Nobody is allowed gather. Nobody is allowed to inquire about the casualties on the front. So I'm a little bit skeptical about the apparatus behind this. We had similar protests backed by NABU and SIPU, the two US intelligence-backed anti-corruption agencies, if you recall. Previously, when Mr. Mindich was caught with $100 million and skipped off to Israel, no less, George. So I'm a little bit skeptical. My view of this is that this is merely an argument over influence in the crime syndicate. That's my view. Fedorov is known as a bit of an innovator. He is a kind of an outsider from Zelensky's Kvartal 95 film production insiders group, which, remember, contained people like his chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, who has recently been arrested for stealing $10 million, which is the kind of money you find in your ashtray or your car, George, if you're involved in corruption in Ukraine, of course, right? So Mr. Yermak now has been arrested, the ex-chief of staff. The man that replaced him as chief of staff was the ex-head of the SBU. This is essentially, it's if you've watched the film Goodfellas, this is essentially, Ukraine is the casino, and Zelensky is basically the man who's up at the front, walking around with a cigar, welcoming the people into the casino. Because not only is Ukraine now a sort of a laundrette for historical fact and reality when it comes to their alliances with the Nazis, the brutality towards their people, it's also a laundromat for massive amounts of money. A country that was exquisitely corrupt before the Russian intervention in 2022 now has had the salt and pepper of millions and millions and millions of weapons, arms, explosives, and billions of dollars sprinkled in with absolutely no trace. You're aware of how the CIA flushed the warlords of Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran on the borders of Iran, particularly with black dollars. The same thing has happened in Ukraine. So I believe this is an argument about money and influence and power, because I can't see how Zelensky would tolerate any kind of protest against the dictatorship. It would be ruthlessly put down, as were the protests against his abduction teams. Remember, there was a smaller protest recently where serving soldiers in the Ukrainian military attacked a group of his abduction commissars on the streets, stripped them of their clothes. They were publicly arrested and made apologize to the state in public. How these young sort of ideological Ukrainians who are chanting death to the Moscows, by the way, they're not libertarians. There was no red flags flying there, George. How they managed to get permission to go out on the streets suggests that somebody gave them that permission. And in this medieval fiefdom, you always have to ask the question, whose man is he?
Well, you may be right. You usually are. Chay Bowes, the master. Thanks for joining us again on the mother of all talk shows. Everyone should follow Chay Bowes on all social media. He's the best informed man about all matters Russian and indeed Eastern European. Let's go to the calls. Richard in England, in Nottinghamshire, has a wish to reply to Chay's interview. Let's hear it. Richard, on you go.
Hi, George. I think you may have remembered me from, oh my word, back when all the Ukrainian stuff started back in 22. We run a Russian delicatessen in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, just a quick one. I was watching yourself and Chay Bowes, which I admire totally. And on my visits to Moscow many times, and I just got back from there last week, actually. I just wanted to say that I know somebody that actually works for the president's office. So do 500 other people, of course. But one of the main things that she said, and I won't mention her name, of course, she said that, listen, Vladimir Putin's a pussycat. If he was taken out in any way, the next person would really make Armageddon on the West over this.
It's a very powerful point. Chay and I were just saying that in other words, either political or military. I mean, I happen to think the next generation of the political leadership in Russia has been born on the battlefield in this war, which I've called it all along, but which they have, until Peskov's redefinition, been calling a special military operation. I think the next president of Russia is quite likely to be a military officer. The stars are aligning, of course, because, like me, Putin is no spring chicken, although he's turned out not to be suffering from any of the life-threatening ailments that the Daily Mail told us he was not long for this world in 2022. He had cancer of this, of that. He had heart problems. He was even being impersonated by a body double. We've had all that. He's a very healthy guy, Putin. And in my opinion, he will complete his term. But the plates are definitely shifting in politics in Moscow. And how could they not, after such a life-changing series of events over the NATO war over Ukraine? So the wishful thinking that, as I put it perhaps unkindly, some kind of Nick Clegg emerging as a leader in Russia are completely absurd. There are elections coming up in September, as you'll be aware, having been there more recently than I, and those elections are moving into fifth gear. Slapinski, who was referred to by Chay Bowes, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, which is not very liberal, I have to tell you. The Left Party, the Socialist Party for a Just Russia. The Communist Party itself, the main opposition in Russia, in the current Duma. The plates are moving, and the forces unleashed by 4 years of war and the total isolation and reorientation of Russia from a country that looked west to Europe to one that looks east to China and India and south to the global south, to Africa and so on. That reorientation, the recognition that there'll be no making up with the West in the lifetime of anyone watching this evening, even if the war ends, even if the sanctions end. Russia has changed its point of view. I mean, literally its point of view, and now looks in different directions to that which it did before. Andrei Melnichenko, the oligarch that I referred to in the last show, and his interview with The Economist, has his piece rather in The Economist, his op-ed in The Economist, is a very substantial indicator of that. All these billionaires that put all their money in the West, in properties and in investments in the West, will never do so again, because once bitten, twice shy. And what a bite when you buy Chelsea Football Club, for example. Abramovich, whom I hate, despise. I hate Roman Abramovich with a vengeance. But what happened to him was pure theft. He spent billions of his own money building Chelsea Football Club into a world football power, and they confiscated it from him because he was Russian. Matter of fact, he's now Israeli. One of the reasons why I hate him. But because he was Russian, they took Chelsea Football Club away from him. And I don't think that's been good for Chelsea. But it certainly has been bad for the intentions of anybody with money of parking it in London. Why would you? If you were in charge of a sovereign wealth fund, why would you put it in the West when you could put it in the Bank of China, where it will earn considerably more and China will not steal it? I mean, I'm no businessman, but it's not rocket science. Richard, thanks for the call. Now, you can download the podcast. There'll be a QR code coming up. There it is. You can download the podcast on that QR code, and you can also listen to the weekly podcast when you are visiting moat.tv, as I know you will. And if you do, then please review it. Give it a 5-star rating. This week, the podcast is in the top 10 for politics in the UAE, Zimbabwe, and Egypt, and in the top 30 for politics in Croatia, Bhutan, Liberia, and Qatar. Thanks to everyone who watches it, and please spread the word about our podcast amongst your friends. There's a legend on the line. I have to give way. It's Donna in Panama. Oh, Donna, what have you got to say for us?
I don't know how I became a legend, George, but it sounds good. I'll take it. Hello? Hello?
You absolutely are a legend and have been for some time. And you didn't even have to buy me lunch in London, which you did in order to get the legendary status.
Thank you. Anyway, and by the way, I've told your story about the American couple escaping McCarthy's witch hunt in the south of France, and their neighbor knocking on their door, giving them a drawing eventually in their friendship, and then they sell it for $30 million because it was Pablo Picasso. I have told that story to so many people, and they love it.
It's a wonderful story. God rest her soul.
Great.
Norma Barsman is her name. And her book is The Red and the Blacklist. I know that because I was the publisher of it, and I've still got some copies.
Oh my God! Well, you save one for me, or I'll buy it. Anyway. But listen, the reason I'm calling is today I was doing dishes this morning and listening to a podcast, and the chap is on. I think he's one of Jimmy Dore's sidekicks, but I'm not sure if it was the Jimmy Dore show or because he was talking with someone else. Anyway, they were talking about how the Silicon Valley is culturally more comfortable with the Democrats, but when they realized they date that realization to the assassination attempt, whether it was real or fake, the so-called, the alleged assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, I believe. Was it Butler, Pennsylvania? Is that the right state? Butler, anyway.
It was, yes.
Of Trump. Yeah, the tech bros, the Peter Thiels and the Mark Zuckerbergs and, well, we know the whole cast of characters. They decided, oh, wow, this is going to gain Trump so much sympathy. We better switch teams. We want to be with a winning team. So that's basically how Trump, and when Trump got Silicon Valley on his side, and they were saying that these guys like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all of them, they want to get rid of labor. I mean, I know you and Chris Hedges and I and lots of us lament the lack of manufacturing jobs and the devastation of the Rust Belt and so on and so forth. And, we all want to see our countries enlivened again and doing well. But these guys, they don't want labor. And so this is why the idea they're saying we will have to elect someone who, like Andrew Wang, maybe not Andrew Wang himself, but someone like him who is going to run on a platform of universal basic income, because this is the direction at least the United States is going. What do you think?
Well, it's a brilliant call and a brilliant issue, and only for the fact that Gayatri is waiting to come on, I'd dilate widely on it. It's a very, very important issue that you raise. And I can go back to a century nearly ago, certainly 90, 80 years ago, when Henry Ford said to the United Auto Workers of America, I could build all my cars with robots and I don't need you at all. And the union said, well, who's going to buy your cars? You can extend that to the economy as a whole. You can use AI and automation to make workers redundant, but when they're redundant, they'll have no wages, and if they have no wages, they cannot buy the products that capitalism is producing and for which there is no replacement of purchasing power. People who don't have wages, or even people who worry about the fact that their wages might not be here for much longer, don't spend. That's an obvious human reaction to becoming broke or fearing that you're going to become broke. And so it's what Marx called the contradictions that are present always within capitalist society. In the past, it was about the need to drive down wages, but when you drive down wages, you reduce the purchasing power of the masses of the people whose demand for goods and services is required by the capitalist system as a whole. And now, with the threat of AI, and you should check out my closing statement, it's only 5 minutes, on CGTN, or I think we've got it on my own Twitter account now, when I make the point that if you destroy labor, you're destroying purchasing power. And as for universal basic income, it's for the birds. The idea that they're going to give you a decent amount of money with which you can live for not working, well, I never met a capitalist that would be trustworthy in doing that. I've got to take one more call before Gayatri, Donna. Please forgive me, and thanks for that call. It's Gary in Scotland on Starmer's last day in office. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, George, just regarding your friend and mine, Keir Starmer, one of his last acts was to hand over yet another £300 million of our British taxpayers' money to the most corrupt government in Europe. That's on top of the billions he sent in the last 2 years. on top of the billions that Johnson and Sunak sent them. Now, I know this is probably a radical idea, but if the Exchequer's got a few £1 billion going spare, I think they might possibly spend it in the UK rather than get to Zelensky so he can buy another Ferrari or buy another villa in Italy. I'm totally sick of this with the British government handing out our cash, whether it be to Zelensky or to some other corrupt government abroad. It's ridiculous. I'm sick of it. Burnham's first job tomorrow should be to reverse that decision. He won't do it, of course, because they're all bought and paid for. That should be his first job tomorrow. Reverse that decision and not another cent to that lot.
Imagine, Gary, if he said that. I mean, under pressure, he's ditched Starmer's digital ID. Although, like with a magician, I'm always looking for the sleight of hand involved in that. And I'll come back to that point, I'm sure, in subsequent weeks. But imagine if Burnham tomorrow said, not another penny for a losing war going to a corrupt dictatorship far away in Eastern Europe with the names of people and places that our people have no knowledge of. Instead, we're going to spend that money on reintroducing the savage attacks that have been made on public sector workers, on old age pensioners, and on the living standards of the poor and middle class in Britain. And we're going to put Britain first. We're going to make Britain great again. And we're going to ensure that our economy is run for the benefit of our people rather than for the benefit of others. Imagine if he said, no more weapons to Israel, no more intelligence and military coordination and collaboration between Britain and Israel, no more visits from Israeli police chiefs, political chiefs, Netanyahu and the rest. No more. There's going to be a big change in Britain. He could call a general election and be swept to an even bigger parliamentary majority. But as you rightly suspect, he's not going to do any of these things because he's bought and paid for by precisely the same interests that propelled Keir Starmer into power. Now, a final look at tonight's Wall of Fame. Tonight's top Moat supporters: Oliver Turney, Jenny Fox, Jeremiah de Robles, Martin Barnsdale, and Mark Cope. A big thank you. A big tip of my new hat. Thanks for backing Moats throughout. I now have to give way to the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, forget Silicon Valley because China is the new mecca for technology. This week, the World Artificial Intelligence Conference took place in Shanghai, where we just were, and China launched the latest AI model, Kimi K2.6, which beats ChatGPT, Grok, Anthropic's Claude, everything. All the tech nerds at Silicon Valley are going crazy for it because suddenly China released this superpower, and they're speaking of technological terms that you and I do not understand, but it's a big thing. Just take it from me. It's a big thing, and it's moved mountains in Silicon Valley. And at the same time, Xi Jinping launched the World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization, which is the WICO. Here we have the president of China setting the new AI order in this world today. And you were just referencing to the speech you gave at the global debate in Beijing, where we were earlier as well, about AI, about how AI should be governed. And actually, one of the things you said in this debate is that AI is like electricity. It can either keep a baby alive in an incubator, or it can kill the life of a man in an electric chair. Well, Xi Jinping said something alike. He said AI, he compares AI to the steam engine and to electricity, which are both epoch-making technology, and emphasizes that it should not be dominated by one country or one clique of countries.
And one class in those countries, the Epstein class.
There we go. This is the one that you emphasize in your debate, and this is what this new cooperation is all about. It is the biggest difference between this launch from China in Shanghai this week is that it's all open AI, as opposed to the closed Android company technology. And it's all done at a fraction of a cost. So the Western world is a bit shaking at this because so this week they founded this cooperation with 29 founding countries, and they have committed to setting up AI training program with developing countries, working together with the ASEAN in Southeast Asia, African Union, African League, the states, the League of Arab Nations, and the African Union, all over the world. So it is really an outreach from China, because the whole purpose of AI is that it has to have a people-centered approach, and it has to be for the sake of good and progress. And this is something that we have seen throughout our stay in China. Everywhere we go, every tech company that we visit, this is the common line and a common philosophy. They mean it. They mean it. It's not for the pockets, to fill the pockets of the few, but to benefit the majority from the cradle to the grave. This is really the purpose of it. AI is used for to make the life better from the baby till the elderly.
It is I'm not a tech bro, definitely, but even I can see the earthquake which took place with the launch of Kimi. This, by the way, was developed by a young man who was refused to be educated in the US. They rejected him in the US.
Wow.
He returned to China and has now beaten the pants of all the American AI developments. Now that's important in itself, but more important, we are in the midst of an equities bubble, a share price bubble of grotesquely much more than the dot-com boom and bust. We are in an economy where people have invested in bloated share prices of AI companies that have now been effectively trashed
completely
by an open source Chinese guy. The Kimi is better than everybody else, and it's free, where everybody else requires you to pay through the nose now, with much more to come later. The fraction of the cost, and these chips, they say China doesn't need Western chips anymore. Speaking of chips, go on.
Well, I was going to, as you were touching on the chips, remember when I was speaking about Pax Silica, the contrast of Pax Silica and this World AI organization. Pax Silica, which was US-led and aims to secure the supply chain, the plundering, the sourcing of critical minerals in order to make all these AI and develop and the manufacturing of it. Whereas China's initiative is to cooperate and to share and for the benefit of all.
It is a remarkable thing, but it's also 6 minutes past 4 in the morning. And I've been talking for 2 hours
we were talking
and
about
more,
2 different chips.
and I have no idea who won the World Cup, and not that much interest either. So I'll bid you, as it were, good night, good morning to those in the East, in Asia, and I'll take my wife for some chips, not silicon, but potato chips, and with a bit of luck, I'll still be alive come Wednesday for the midweek mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from China, again in the middle of the night. Stay tuned.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.